Have you ever felt that suddenly people started to move away from your life, as if the universe was pushing you into an unlawful isolation? Perhaps friendships that once seemed solid have dissolved, relationships lost meaning, and places that once welcomed you seem strange. If this is happening to you, pay close attention, because it may not be a mistake, but a profound sign that your transformation has begun. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, studied this phenomenon and found that before a great awakening, the universe always removes everything that is no longer aligned with our new frequency. And I know this can be scary. At first, it may seem unfair. You might ask yourself, why is this happening to me? Am I being punished? Did I do something wrong? But what if I told you that this isolation can be the greatest gift you have ever received? What if this phase of removal, solitude, silence is exactly what you need to reconnect with your true purpose? Jung said that the human psyche undergoes deep processes of transformation, and one of them is individuation, where the ego needs to dissolve so that the true essence can emerge. And in this process, the universe may seem cruel. It may seem that it is taking you everything, but in fact it is just cleaning the way to something bigger. You may have noticed that certain conversations no longer make sense, that certain people seem to vibrate at a different frequency than yours, which places that once brought you comfort now make you uncomfortable. This is no coincidence. When your consciousness begins to expand, when its energy level begins to change, the universe automatically reorganizes everything around it. Because what is vibrating at a lower frequency can no longer accompany you. And often, this reorganization comes through isolation. But instead of resisting this process, instead of trying to hold people and situations that are clearly no longer part of your journey, I want you to ask yourself, what if this isolation is a call? What if this clearance is an invitation to look inside, to strengthen your connection with yourself, to prepare for something grand that are yet to come? Carl Jung said that who looks out dreams, who looks inside awakens. And that can be your moment of awakening. The problem is that most people resist. They try to fight the flow, try to cling to what they are escaping, try to force connections that clearly no longer exist. But what happens when you fight a wave? You get tired, you wear out, you spend energy trying to prevent something that is inevitable. But what if, instead of resisting, you simply flow with the process? What if you accepted this isolation as a period of rebirth, as a time necessary to strengthen your mind, your spirit, your intuition? Because that's exactly what is happening now. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. The universe is creating space in your life for new connections, new opportunities, new experiences. But for this to happen, you need to be willing to release what no longer serves you. And this is the time to do that. Now, I want you to continue with me, because in the next stretch of this video, I will show you why this isolation can be the biggest gift the universe has ever given you, and how you can use this moment to accelerate your transformation consciously. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. But before we continued, I want to know about you. You've been through a moment like that, where everything seemed to move away and you felt completely isolated. If so, tell me here in the comments. I want to know your experience, because sharing this can help you see this process in a new way and at the same time inspire other people who are living this phase now. And since you're here, don't forget to leave your like. It may seem simple, but it makes all the difference. When you enjoy this video, YouTube understands that this content is relevant and shows to more people who are also going through this moment and need to hear this message now. And if you are not already subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button and activate notifications, because here we talk about self-knowledge, spiritual awakening, and the signs that the universe sends us. If this video appeared to you, it was no coincidence, and the next content will help you even more on this journey. Now let's go straight to what really matters. How to turn this isolation period into a true preparation for your new phase. Because yes, there is a greater purpose for all this, and I will show you exactly how to use it to your advantage. Have you ever felt like suddenly everything around you were changing, and the people who were once part of your life were moving away for no apparent reason? As if the universe were pushing you into forced isolation, disconnecting you from the world, leaving you more and more alone. This kind of feeling can be scary, and most people's first reaction is to think that something is wrong with them. They begin to ask themselves, did I change? Am I doing something wrong? Why does it seem that no one understands me anymore? This feeling of displacement, of living at a different frequency from others, may be distressing. You may even feel that conversations do not flow like before, that the places that used to bring you comfort now seem strange, that the connections that were once natural now seem forced, and the most frustrating is that you often try to look for answers and don't find them. What made sense before now seems empty. The relationships that were once part of your routine now seem superficial, and little by little you realize that you are alone in this process, without a map, without clear guidance, without anyone to tell you exactly what is happening. But what Carl Jung has discovered throughout his studies is that this sensation of isolation is not a mistake, not a punishment, and definitely does not mean that you are going the wrong way. On the contrary, this feeling of loneliness and disconnection can be one of the greatest signs that your consciousness is expanding, that your mind is crossing a deep transformation, and that you are leaving behind what no longer resonates with your true essence. And here is the most important question. This phase of isolation does not happen by chance. The universe does not simply drive you away from people and situations for no reason. He does this because his energy is changing. When you begin to see life differently, when it begins to question old standards, when it awakens to a new level of consciousness, inevitably your vibration changes. And this energy change makes you stop connecting with certain frequencies, with certain environments, with certain people. Have you noticed that when you are going through a growth process, some people just start to walk away, or that after a deep learning phase, do you feel that certain places no longer bring you the same comfort as before? This is because the evolution of your consciousness creates a natural misalignment. Those who vibrated as often as you may no longer be aligned with your new path, and the universe, which always works in your favor, will begin to remove from your life all that is not in tune with your new level of perception. But the big problem is that most people do not understand this process. They try to resist, they despair when they realize that certain friendships are cooling, that certain social circles no longer make sense. And this resistance creates suffering, because instead of accepting that this remoteness is part of the journey, they try to cling to what is leaving. They try to force connections that clearly no longer exist. But what Jung teaches us is that isolation is a call. When everything seems to be undoing, it is because something new is wanting to emerge. And so that this new one has room to grow, the old man needs to be left behind. And maybe you are exactly at this point now. You may feel you are losing people, losing references, losing certainties. Maybe you look around and feel that you don't belong anywhere anymore. And I want you to understand one thing. This is not the end. This is the beginning. This phase of loneliness is your portal for transformation. What you are feeling now is the universe preparing you for something larger, for more authentic connections, for experiences more aligned with your true essence. But for this to happen, you need to be willing to trust the process. And I know that trusting can be difficult when everything seems uncertain, because the ego wants security or predictability. He wants to keep everything the way he always has been, because it gives him the false sense of control. But the spiritual awakening does not work that way. It requires you to learn to release. It requires you to accept the unknown. It requires that you understand that when something is being taken from your life, it is because this space needs to be occupied by something much bigger. And now, I want you to reflect. Is this isolation you are living, in fact, an invitation to look inside? Is the universe not just giving you time to reconnect with yourself, to strengthen yourself, to understand your own journey before bringing new connections to your life? Because this is the truth that few understand. Isolation comes before expansion. Silence comes before clarity. Solitude comes before the rebirth. And if you are going through this now, I want you to take a deep breath and understand that it won't last forever. What you are feeling now is part of your preparation. You are being shaped for something bigger. Your energy is being refined to attract what really makes sense to you. But for this to happen, you need to allow this process to happen without resistance. Now, continue with me, because in the next stretch of this video, I will show you how to turn this phase of isolation into one of the greatest growth opportunities of your life. And more than that, I will show you how to know exactly when the universe is preparing you for a new cycle and what signs pay attention right now. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, dedicated his life to the study of the human psyche and the mystery that involves the process of inner transformation. Unlike many thinkers of his day, he did not see the human mind only as a set of chemical reactions and rational processes. He believed that there was something much deeper happening within us, something that transcended the traditional explanation of psychology. For Jung, the human being not only lives his life following pre-established standards, but undergoes deep cycles of evolution. And one of the lighter signs that you are crossing one of these cycles is just when the universe begins to isolate you. If you have already felt disconnected from the world, as if you were being away from people, places, and even an old version of yourself, know that this is not a mistake. In fact, Jung found that this isolation can be one of the biggest signs that his mind and soul are undergoing an individuation process. This term, created by him, describes a moment when his true self begins to emerge, dismantling the false identities you have built throughout life. And here is something that few people know. This phase of isolation is not something you choose consciously, but something that happens naturally when your level of consciousness expands. What Jung realized was that, before a big awakening, our energy changes, and this energy change creates a chain effect at everything around us. People who once seemed essential in their lives begin to move away. Environments that once brought comfort come to look strange. What made sense once now seems empty. And this is because your mind is reconfiguring yourself to a new level of existence. Many people who go through this process report similar sensations. A strong desire to move away from the noise of the world, a desire to spend more time alone, a perception that ordinary conversations no longer satisfy them. It may even come a feeling of being out of place, as if something inside they already knew they belonged to a different space, but they still didn't know exactly which one. This phenomenon was widely studied by Jung and many other thinkers of deep psychology. He believed that the human mind is composed of hidden parts, layers of the unconscious that reveal themselves as we approach our true essence. And that is why, before a great evolutionary leap, the universe pulls us in. He puts us in this state of recollection so that we can hear our own voice without external interference. Think about it. How could you understand who you really are if you were constantly surrounded by noise, distractions, and opinions of others? How could you access your deeper intuition if you were always influenced by what others expect from you? Jung said that who looks out dreams, who looks inside wakes up, and that is exactly the purpose of this moment of isolation. The universe is giving you a unique chance of looking inside, reconnecting with what has always been in you, but that may have been drowned out by expectations, fears, distractions of everyday life. And here comes a fundamental point that many people do not understand. Isolation does not mean loneliness in the negative sense of the word. He is not a purposeless void. He is a sacred space for transformation. But most people fight it. They resist silence, try to fill this phase with distractions, frantically seek connections that no longer make sense. And this resistance creates pain. Because deep down, what is happening is an invitation to a rebirth, but instead of accepting it, many people desperately try to hold on to the old structures. But Jung teaches us that this process is inevitable. The more you evolve, the more you change, and the more you change, the more the world around you need adjust to reflect this new version of you. This means that some relationships naturally dissolve. Certain paths that once seemed clear now become uncertain, and all this happens because your old self is dying to make room for a new identity. And if you look back, you will see that this pattern has happened in your life before. Think about every time you have undergone a great transformation. Before reaching the new, there has always been a phase of chaos, doubts, uncertainty. There was always that moment when it seemed that everything was crumbling, when in fact everything was reorganizing. And what Jung realized is that this phase of transition is essential for the journey of self-knowledge. Because without it, you would never disconnect from what you no longer serve you. So if you feel that you are being isolated, that everything is changing, and that no one seems to understand what you are going through, know that this is part of the process. You are exactly where you need to be. You are going through a moment that millions of people before you have crossed. And all of them, by accepting this phase, discovered something great. When you stop resisting and start embracing this process, the true transformation begins to happen. And now, I want you to continue with me, because in the next stretch of this video, I will show you how to identify the signs that this isolation is really a call from the universe for your transformation, and how you can use it to your advantage. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. Carl Jung called this dark night process of the soul, a concept that describes a period of deep inner transformation where everything seems to fall apart, where we feel that we are being away from people, places, and even our own certainties. It is a moment of existential crisis, where we begin to question the life we have led so far, our beliefs, our relationships, and even our identity. What seemed right before now sounds empty. Conversations that previously made sense begin to seem superficial. What used to bring joy now no longer arouses emotion. This is the moment when many people feel that they have completely lost control over their lives, and that can be scary. You may feel like wandering in unknown territory, no map, without direction, without any guarantee that you will find a new way. But as painful as this moment seems, Jung stated that it is precisely in this state of confusion and isolation that the true renaissance begins. Think about it for a moment. If you were never forced to get out of your comfort zone, if you never felt that deep discomfort, you would remain the same forever. You would remain stuck with the same beliefs, the same routines, the same relationships that often no longer make sense. But life, or rather, the universe itself, knows exactly when it is time to push you into a new level of consciousness. And for that to happen, he needs to remove everything that is not aligned with his new journey. And that's exactly where isolation comes in. The removal does not happen by chance. It is an energy reconfiguration, a preparation. You may not realize at the moment, but everything that is happening is now making room for something new to appear. It's like a forest that before flourishing again needs to go through a natural fire to eliminate everything that no longer serves. And this phase of the dark night of the soul is just that. A fire that burns the illusions, the lies we tell ourselves, the false identities we create to fit into the world. Jung realized that this transition can be incredibly lonely. Often, the people around us do not understand what we are going through. They can even judge us, tell us that we are exaggerating, that we are strange, that we are moving away for no reason. But the truth is that when we are going through this phase, we can no longer support the same conversations as before, the same habits, the same standards. And that is normal. This loneliness is not a mistake. It is necessary for you to reconnect with who you really are. Think for a moment, if the universe no longer moved you from everything that no longer makes sense, how would you find your own truth? How would you hear your intuition? How would you differentiate what really comes from your essence from what was imposed on you through the outside world? And here is a crucial detail that Jung realized. Most people try to resist this phase. They struggle against removal, try to force connections that no longer make sense, try to fill the void with distractions. But this resistance only prolongs suffering. The more you try to avoid this isolation phase, the harder it becomes. Because the purpose of this process is not punish, but transform you. Jung said that nothing changes until it becomes conscious. That is, until you look inside and face what needs to be changed, you will continue to live the same situations repeatedly. The universe will continue to put you in the same experiences, moving you away from the same people, showing you the same signs, until you finally stop and understand that this period of transition is not a punishment, but an invitation. And this invitation is simple. Look inside. The dark night of the soul forces us to ask questions we avoid for a long time. Who am I without the validation of others? What really makes me happy? What in my life is true, and what is just a repetition of patterns that have taught me? Am I living according to my soul, or just following what they expect from me? And it is these questions that begin to open a new path. It is these reflections that allow us to really be reborn. When you accept that this isolation is a necessary phase, when you stop trying to resist and simply surrender to the process, something begins to change within you. You begin to realize that even without old connections, even without the safety of the past, you are still whole. You realize that you can find answers within yourself without needing anyone's approval or company, and suddenly, what once seemed like a punishment begins to seem like a liberation. You realize that you were carrying weights that weren't yours, living stories that no longer made sense. You start to feel lightness, a freedom that once seemed impossible. And it is at this moment that something magical happens. The universe, which once seemed to move you away from everything, begins to bring you new opportunities, new connections, new experiences. But this time, everything will be different, because now you will be aligned with your true essence. Now I want you to stop and reflect. What in your life no longer makes sense, but you are still trying to hold? What inside you are asking to be transformed? Is this phase of isolation not, in fact, the beginning of your rebirth? If these words made sense to you, continue with me, because in the next excerpt from this video, I will show you how to turn this dark night of the soul into a conscious growth period, and how to identify the signs that indicate that you are on the right track. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. Have you noticed how, before major changes in your life, does everything seem to collapse? As if, suddenly, the universe began to take people out of your way, close doors that were once open, push you into unexpected loneliness. You may even try to fight it, insist on maintaining certain connections, striving to get back to what it was before. But deep down, something tells you that this cycle no longer makes sense. It is as if life is trying to tell you something, as if you are preparing the ground for a greater transformation, but at the moment you cannot clearly see where it is taking you. This clearance, this feeling of isolation that you may be feeling now, is not random. He is part of a deep process of reconfiguration of his life, a process that Carl Jung described as essential for the awakening of consciousness. Before any major change, before any rebirth, first comes a period of deconstruction. And this deconstruction can be painful because it disassembles everything that is familiar, everything that once seemed safe. But is this really a loss? Or is this departure actually a liberation? If you look back at the most important moments of your life, you will probably notice a pattern. Before each big change, there was a period of crisis, a moment when everything seemed to be crumbling. You may have gone through this when you changed your job, when you ended a relationship, when you felt that certain friendships were no longer the same. And the moment this happened, it may have been difficult to accept. Perhaps it has hurt, perhaps it has seemed unfair. But then, over time, when you looked back, you realized that all these changes took you exactly where you needed to be. What if now is the same thing? What if this isolation you are living is just an interval between your old version and your version that is about to emerge? What if, instead of seeing this as a problem, could you see it as a gift? Because, in fact, the universe is not pushing you away to punish you. It is moving you away to protect you. He is distancing you from everything that is no longer aligned with his purpose. Everything that could prevent you from growing. And this is a detail that few people realize. Not everything that seems to be a loss is really a pierda. Sometimes what seems like an end is actually a realignment. If people are coming out of your life, if you feel that certain cycles are closing, it may be because these connections have already fulfilled your role. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, he will direct your life and you will call it destination. And often, this isolation is the way the universe has to force you to look inside, to give you the silence you need to realize which standards you have repeated, which stories you keep living without realizing it. You may be realizing that some friendships that once seemed strong no longer make sense. You may be feeling that certain places no longer bring you the same energy as before. You may have changed so much internally that you feel that the world around you did not follow this change. And this feeling can be scary because it takes us out of our comfort zone. But think about it. How could you keep growing up if you were surrounded by people and situations that vibrate at a frequency that is no longer yours? How could you access a new level of your life if you were stuck with the same habits, the same standards, the same stories? This isolation, this feeling of being alone that no one else understands, you can be a sign that your energy is changing. And when your energy changes, your life changes. You may even try to fit in the same places again. You can try to reconnect with the same people, but deep down, you feel that something is no longer the same. And this is because it is not. You are no longer the same person as it was before. And the sooner you accept this, the faster this transition process will become clear. But here is the key point. This isolation is not a mistake. He is an invitation to look inside, to truly know yourself, to understand which parts of yours are still attached to the past and which parts are ready to jump. And if you accept this invitation, allow yourself to live this phase without resistance, something magical can happen. You can see that what seemed to be a loss, in fact, was a relief. That those connections that broke were no longer healthy, that path that was actually interrupted was deviating you from its real purpose. And if you still have doubts that this can be a gift, think about it. The universe never Remove something from your life without a reason. Whenever it closes a door, it is because a new one is about to open. But for this new door to reveal itself, you need to be willing to cross the void. And this emptiness, this phase of transition, is exactly where you are now. Now, I want you to stop and reflect for a moment. Is this isolation phase really negative, or is it an opportunity to rebuild? Is this clearance a sign that something is wrong, or is it an energy adjustment so that you can attract new experiences and new connections that really make sense to who you are becoming? If this message made sense to you, continue with me, because in the next excerpt from this video, I will show you how to use this phase to your advantage, how to turn this isolation over a period of accelerated growth, and how to recognize the signs that your life is about to enter a new cycle. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. Think of a butterfly. Before opening her wings and flying, before revealing her true form, she goes through a deep process of transformation. She begins her journey like a caterpillar, crawling around the world, limited, seeing life from a restricted point of view. For a while, this reality seems enough. She follows her way, feeds, survives. But then, something happens. Something inside it changes. A silent call. An inexplicable need to isolate herself, to withdraw from the world she knew, and not knowing exactly why, she builds a cocoon around her and enters the dark. Now think about what happens within this cocoon. Outside, it may seem that nothing is happening, but inside, the caterpillar undergoes a process of total deconstruction. Its cells dissolve, its ancient form ceases to exist, and a new structure begins to be created. At this stage, it is no longer a caterpillar, but it is not a butterfly yet. It is in the middle of the process, in a transition space, without defined identity, without certainty. Just a big void, a silent reconfiguration happening in the dark. And here is the most important question. This process cannot be interrupted. If someone tried to open the cocoon ahead of time, trying to speed up the transformation, the butterfly would be incomplete. His wings would not be ready. His muscles would not be strong enough. She couldn't fly. Now think of you. Think about your journey from this moment of isolation, this feeling of being lost, not knowing exactly where you are. Going, isn't it exactly this cocoon? Is this period of removal of people, ancient situations, is not your phase of transformation? Is what an emptiness seems not, in fact, a space being created so that your new identity can emerge? Carl Jung studied this process and realized that the human being goes through very similar cycles. Before each major change, before each rebirth, there is always a period of collection, confusion, destruction of what we were, so that something new can arise. He called this the process of individuation, the way to become who we really are. But this path is not linear. He goes through moments of darkness, stages where everything seems stagnant, where we feel that we are alone. But just like the butterfly, this isolation period does not mean that nothing is happening. It means that true transformation is happening at the deepest level of its existence. And just like the butterfly, you need that time. You need this space, because trying to force yourself to go back to ancient life, try to fit in the same routines, the same conversations, the same standards. It would be like opening the cocoon ahead of time. You would be incomplete, without strength, without completely absorbed your new identity. This time alone, this silence, this phase where everything seems distant, is the moment when your wings are growing. You may not see them yet, but they are there. Another powerful example to understand this process is Chinese bamboo. It has a completely different growth from other trees. When bamboo seed is planted in the early years, nothing happens. You can water it, you can take care of the ground, you can wait, and yet no growth signal appears on the surface. But under the earth, something extraordinary is happening. The roots are expanding, they are strengthening, they are creating a deep and resistant base. And then, after years of apparent stagnation, bamboo begins to grow, and grows fast. Within a few months, it can reach tens of meters high. Now think about how many times you might have felt that your life was standing, that nothing was changing. How many times you may have felt like this buried seed, without seeing the results, without understanding the purpose of what was happening. But is it like bamboo is not being built right now? Is this phase of loneliness, removal, silence, isn't it exactly the time when your roots are deepening, preparing you for the accelerated growth that is coming? Jung said that what we deny submits, and what we accept transforms us. This means that the more you resist this process, the more it tries to fight this isolation against this clearance, the more difficult it becomes. But when you accept that this is part of your journey, when you understand that this phase is necessary for your evolution, it all starts to change. The suffering decreases, fear dissolves, and gradually you begin to see that what seemed to be the end was actually a new beginning. And here is something one tells you not everyone is ready to go through this transformation. Many people, feeling this phase of darkness approaching, do everything to avoid it. They are distracted, sink into external stimuli, try to cling desperately to the past. But those that accept the call, which allow this process to happen, are the ones that really reborn. They are the ones that come out of the strongest, most conscious, most connected to who they really are. And if you feel that you are in this process now, you feel that your life seems to be going through this phase of isolation, I want you to know that it won't last forever. Like the butterfly, there will be a time when you will feel it is time to break the cocoon, to open your wings. But until this moment comes, you need to trust the process. You need to understand that this phase has a purpose, that each part of this transformation is taking you exactly where you need to be. Now, I want you to stop for a moment and think, is this period of clearance that you are living now is not exactly what you needed to prepare for something bigger? Does instead of seeing this as a problem, could you start seeing as a gift? If this message made sense to you, continue with me, because in the next excerpt from this video, I will show you how to enjoy this phase in the best way possible, how to transform this period of isolation into a true trampoline for your evolution, and how to recognize the signs that your metamorphosis is coming to an end. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this, the phase of your life. If you have come here, you already understand that this isolation that the universe is imposing on you is not a punishment, but a process of deep transformation. You understood that just as the butterfly needs the cocoon to strengthen yourself before flying, just as bamboo needs to create roots before growing rapidly, you are also undergoing reconfiguration. But now the big question arises: what can you do to deal with this moment in the best way possible? How to transform this phase of clearance and loneliness into a true trampoline for its evolution? The first thing you need to understand is that the more you resist, the more painful this process becomes. The suffering comes from the fight against what is already happening. When you try to force old connections, when you insist on returning to an environment that no longer resonates with your new energy, when you refuse to accept this transition, the universe only intensifies the signs. It pushes you more and more into yourself until you understand that there is no other way other than acceptance. And here is the first step. Embrace this moment. Instead of trying to escape this silence, this solitude, this feeling of emptiness, allow yourself to live it fully. You don't have to fill each space with distractions. You don't have to escape to social networks, series, or anything else that just anesthesia. On the contrary, this is the perfect time to look inside, to explore parts of yours that may have been ignored for a long time. One of the most powerful ways to do this is through meditation. And if you think meditating only means emptying your mind and trying not to think of anything, I want to show you a different approach. Meditation can simply be a moment of absolute presence with yourself. It can be to close your eyes for a few minutes and watch your thoughts without judging them. It can be paying attention to your breath, feeling the beats of your heart and realizing that despite everything that is changing in your life, you are still here, present, whole, exactly where you need to be. Another extremely powerful exercise is writing about what you are feeling. Take a notebook and start registering everything that goes through your mind. Write without filters, without censorship, without the need to make sense. Put out your frustrations, your doubts, your fears, but also your perceptions, your small epiphanies, the things that once went unnoticed and now seem lighter. When you write, you shape your thoughts. You organize what once seemed like an inner chaos. And often the answers you seek so much begin to emerge in the midst of these written words. In addition, this period of isolation is an amazing opportunity to question your beliefs. Many of the certainties you had may be being challenged now. Perhaps you are realizing that certain ideas that once seemed absolute no longer make sense. Perhaps you are questioning what you really want for your life, what your true desires are, what are the ways that really make sense to you. And this is one of the most valuable gifts of this phase, the opportunity to redefine your identity with total freedom. And here comes a crucial point. Stop comparing yourself with others. When you are going through this isolation phase, it is very easy to look at other people's lives and think they are on a more stable, happier, more successful path. But the truth is that each one has his own time, his own process, his own journey of evolution. What seems to be a stagnation phase for you can actually be a moment of preparation for something gigantic. Have you noticed how winter looks like a period of death in nature? The trees lose their leaves, the cold takes over, and on the outside it seems that everything is lifeless. But in fact, the seeds are dormant, accumulating energy for the arrival of spring. Its insulation phase can be this winter. On the outside, it may seem that nothing is happening, but inside, you are accumulating energy, strengthening yourself, preparing to be reborn. And that is why you need to allow yourself to change. The biggest mistake you can make at this stage is to try to cling to your old version, to force the continuity of a cycle that has already ended. The more you allow yourself to release what you need to go, the faster the transformation happens. And this change doesn't have to be radical. It doesn't have to be sudden. You can start with small choices, small daily decisions that reflect the person you are becoming. It can be to change your routine, explore new interests, test new ways of seeing life. One of the most transformative things you can do during this time is to follow your intuition. When you are going through a moment of transition, your intuition becomes more sharp. You can start to feel impulses to change certain things, to explore new paths, to do something you have never done before. And many times the rational mind will try to resist, will say that this makes no sense, that this is not the right time. But Jung said that intuition gives us access to wisdom that goes beyond logical thinking. This is the time to hear this inner voice, to trust that this inner call has a purpose. And one of the most practical ways to connect with this intuition is through conscious solitude. Spend time with yourself, without distractions. It can be an outdoor walk, a moment in silence when waking up, a time dedicated to feeling, without the need to understand everything immediately. The more you allow yourself to be with yourself, the more you reconnect with your essence. And maybe now you are wondering, how long will this phase last? The answer is that it depends on you. It depends on how open you are to this process, how willing you are surrendering to this transformation. The more you resist, the more time it takes. The more you accept, the faster the pieces start to fit. Now stop for a moment and ask yourself, what is this moment of isolation trying to teach me? What can I learn about myself in this period? What is my intuition trying to show me, but I'm not listening yet? If these words have resonated with you, continue with me, because in the next passage of this video, I will show you how to turn this transition phase into a real rebirth, how to know when this cycle is coming to an end, and how to prepare for the next level of your life. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. When you understand that this isolation is not the end, but a rebirth, everything changes. The sense of loneliness, which once seemed a weight, now begins to make sense. You realize that you are not being abandoned by the universe, but reallocated to a new cycle, a new reality that is being prepared for you. And the more you resist this phase, the more painful it becomes. But when you accept it, when you surrender to the process and understand that this is part of your evolution, something powerful happens. You start to grow with this transformation. Think of all the great changes of your life. Think of the times when you thought everything was crumbling, just to, sometime later, realize that it was necessary for you to get where you are now. Life always works in our favor, even when we can't see it at the moment. And this isolation you are living now can be just that. The universe moving you away from everything that no longer makes sense because something bigger is coming. And here comes one of the deepest aspects of this transformation: detachment. Some connections need to be cut so that new ones can arise. Some doors need to be closed so that others can open. Some old versions of you need to die so that your true essence can emerge. Carl Jung said that what you resist persists. That is, the more you try to hold on what you are already leaving, the more you suffer. But the moment you let go, the moment you stop fighting this change, you realize that you never had to hold anything. What is truly yours will always remain, and what needs to leave no longer part of your way. And I know this can be difficult to accept, because we human beings have a natural tendency to cling. We created ties, created expectations, created a sense of identity based on the people around us, the places we attend, the routines we follow. But what if I told you that this isolation phase is the perfect opportunity for you to redefine who it really is? What if, instead of clinging to what no longer makes sense, would you use this moment to consciously rebuild your identity? This means that instead of looking at this time as a time of loss, you can start seeing it as a time of choices. You can choose which aspects of your life still make sense. You can choose which habits you want to bring to your new cycle. You can choose which people still resonate with their energy. This is the moment when you have a chance to create a life that really reflects who you are, not just who the world expected you to be. And this change of mindset can transform absolutely everything. Because when you understand that being alone now is a way for a better future, fear disappears. You stop feeling you need to run after connections that no longer have the purpose. You realize that you don't have to fit in places that don't do you good anymore. You find that true security comes from within, not from external circumstances. And this transformation does not happen at once. It is not a moment of instant lighting where it suddenly makes sense. It is a process. One day you wake up and realize that you no longer miss certain things. The other day realizes that the conversations that once affected you now no longer touch you. Over time, you realize that your energy is changing, that your perception of the world is expanding. And when you least expect it, you will look back and realize that that period of loneliness was one of the most important moments of your life. Jung believed that every human being goes through this process of individuation, this path of deconstruction and internal reconstruction. But he also knew that not everyone has the courage to cross it. Many people prefer to go back to the comfort zone, cling to the past, avoid pain of growth. But those who accept this call, who cross the dark night of the soul and leave the other side, discover something that few people discover: the true freedom of being who they really are. And this freedom is priceless. When you allow yourself to go through this transformation, when you accept that this isolation is part of your awakening, you realize that you no longer need external validation to feel complete. You find that you can be whole by yourself, that you can support yourself in your own strength, that you can trust your own process. And when this confidence sets in, life changes completely, because you start attracting new opportunities, new connections, new experiences that are aligned with this new version of you. And maybe right now you are still wondering, how long will this phase last? When will I feel I left the cocoon? When will I see the changes happening in my life? The answer is, it depends on you. It depends on how willing you are to release what no longer belongs to you. It depends on how open you are for this transformation, because the universe always responds to our energy. If you are still stuck in the past, it cannot bring you something new. But when you finally accept that this isolation is a necessary phase, when you stop seeing it as a punishment and begin to see as a gift, the flow of life reorganizes and it all starts to fit. So now I want you to stop for a moment and ask yourself, what is still stuck in me, within me? What am I still holding that no longer part of my way anymore? Am I ready to allow this transformation to happen completely? If these words have made sense to you, continue with me, because in the next passage of this video, I will show you how to identify the signs that this phase of isolation is coming to an end, and how to prepare for the new reality that is about to emerge in your life. What I will reveal you now can completely change the way you see this phase of your life. If the universe is isolating you, it means that it is preparing you for something grand. This remoteness you feel now, this phase of silence, sudden change, loss of connections is not happening by chance. Nothing is being taken from you for no reason. What seems to be loneliness, what seems to be an empty, is actually a space that is being created for something greater. But to see this, you need to trust the process. You may not see now, you may not understand why certain people have come out of your life, why some ways have closed, why suddenly you feel that you no longer belong to certain places. But in a while, when you look back, you will realize that each piece fit perfectly, that every absence, every change, every moment of doubt was essential for something new to arise. And when this new one finally comes, you will realize that if the universe had not removed you, you would never be ready to receive it. How many times in your life have you been through moments that seemed the end of everything, but actually just the beginning of a new phase? Think about it. Think about every time you thought you had lost something essential, but then realized that this loss led you to something even better. Life has a curious way to guide us, to take us exactly where we need to be, even when we resist, even when we try to grab ourselves to what no longer makes sense. What is happening to you now is that you are being realized. What you need to stay will be. What you need to go will. And the more you resist, the more painful the process becomes. But the moment you accept that this phase is necessary, the moment you stop fighting what is already happening and surrender to this transformation, it all starts to flow. And I know that trusting the invisible can be difficult. We want immediate answers. We want to understand everything now. We want guarantees. But the truth is that life doesn't work like that. Major changes, they require a leap of faith. They require you to move on, even without seeing the whole way. And that is exactly what you are being asked from you now. Trust. Trust that the universe does not go wrong. Trust that if something is coming out of your life, it is because it was no longer to be there. Trust that if you are feeling disconnected from the world, it is because you are being called to reconnect yourself. Trust that this phase will not last forever, that it has a purpose, that it is shaping you to something you can't see yet, but when it comes, it will make everything make sense. And when this new phase is finally revealed, you will be someone else. You will be more clear about who you really are, about what you really want, what really matters. You will no longer feel stuck with old versions of yourself. You will have evolved, became someone stronger, more conscious, more aligned with your true purpose. So now I want you to stop for a moment and feel that message inside you. Is this phase of isolation really a punishment, or is it a gift? Is this loneliness really a problem, or is it a portal for your rebirth? If this message has played something inside you, if you feel that this process is happening in your life now, write in the comments, "I trust my process," because this statement has power. When you write this, you are telling the universe that you accept this transformation, which is ready to move on without fear, that you understand that everything is happening exactly as it should. And if this video made sense to you, leave your like, because it helps me bring this message to more people who also need to hear it now. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button and activate notifications, because in the next video, I will show you how to interpret the signals that the universe is sending you now and how to use them to speed up your transformation. Now click on the video that is appearing on the screen and continue this journey with me, because what you will find now can give you exactly the answers you were looking for.